And welcome back. Conversation is Ventilation. I am your host, The Shimmick, and thank you for joining me for another episode. It's going to be a burner. It's going to be a great one. We got a guest today, Dr. Tyler Goldbach. You're going to like him. He's a great guy. But before we get going, let's dedicate this, as we normally do, to a fallen first responder. And unfortunately today, Jeremy R. Labonte, this one is for you. 24 years old, 3 years and 3 months of service at the Roswell PD department in Georgia. He was gunned down. He responded to a suspicious person call. When he got there and was approaching the person, they pulled a gun and shot him. So, unfortunately, this is terrible, and it's never going to stop. I wish it would. So our hearts and our thoughts and our prayers go out to his wife, his family, Roswell PD, Georgia, all of first responders, all police departments, all police officers, everyone. It's dangerous out there. Take care of each other. Watch out. Okay. So this one's for you, Jeremy Labonte. All right. Rest in peace. All right, like I said, we've got a great one coming up. So buckle in, buckle up. Let's go. All right, welcome into the studio, Spare Bedroom Studios. And Doctor, can you confirm that this is a spare bedroom?
This is, yeah.
This
I
isn't
like your setup.
This isn't a rented space in some high rise somewhere or a missile silo. This is actually behind the camera is my closet. The doors fell off, so yeah.
Is that you skydiving up there?
That's me skydiving.
Oh.
I was going through the process when I was 19, 20 years old and didn't pass.
Oh no.
So one of the jokes, since you brought it up, is that I failed at falling school. So I've dropped out of 3 community colleges, and I failed skydiving school.
Oh, man.
So, yeah, that's me. But, yeah, this is welcome to Spare Bedroom Studios. Dr. Goldbach, Tyler Goldbach. Okay.
Yeah, glad to be here. Looking forward to it.
So explain who you are to Decatur Fire.
So I'm the Decatur Fire medical director.
Okay. So when shit's hitting the fan and we have to call the doctor, you're who we call.
Yep, that's exactly right.
What is that like?
It's great. I enjoy being able to work with pre-hospital people, EMS, fire, because I'm also the medical director for Decatur Morgan EMS. And so love being able to educate, mentor, and help, people kind of out taking, medicine to the streets.
Yeah. How long have you been in it?
So I've got out of residency for emergency medicine, started working in Decatur ER almost 4 years ago now, I guess.
Okay.
And been doing the medical director stuff for Decatur Fire and Decatur Morgan EMS for a couple years now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're a young man, though.
Yeah.
I remember we met for coffee before all this. And first off, Ryan Fennell, who's going to be a doctor someday because of you, he said we have to get together. So we met for coffee, and I'm like, this kid pulls up. And when I say kid, he's a young man. And I'm like, Jesus, Doc.
Yeah.
I was expecting some old crotchety guy with, just maybe pull up in a Buick.
Right.
And you pull up. But no, it's been good. It's fun to put a face to what the guy on the other end of the phone.
Yeah.
Luckily, I don't have to. So let's start at the beginning. We have a very interesting, and this is sometimes the universe works in mysterious ways. Okay. The call that started CIV when the child was in the pool and I went to the meeting and I, started this whole CIV process. That first call was what to you?
That was my first call as the medical director for Decatur Morgan EMS.
Very first call.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So Tyler Stinson, who's the director of operations side for Decatur Morgan EMS paramedic, we were at the 911 call center. He was just kind of showing me around the call center, getting me to meet everybody, see how that process works. And we were sitting there talking with one of the dispatchers, and he kind of hears one of the other dispatchers say out loud, is the child still in the pool?
Yep.
And so immediately, like, our ears picked up and we're like, what's that call?
So you're standing behind the dispatcher,
Mhm.
watching him typing away and,
Yep.
and taking
Mhm.
the call.
Yeah. And so he got the, the address, and kind of immediately before the call was even like completed, we could very quickly see what this call was and what was going on.
So we weren't even dispatched probably yet.
No, I don't think y'all had even got
You were
dispatched
probably
yet.
en route to that call before we were.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And so we got in his QRV and went straight to the call. And by that time we got there, because the 911 call center is kind of outside of Decatur City a little bit. And this call was kind of on the other side of town anyway. So it took us a little while to get there. So Decatur Fire was already on scene. Decatur Morgan EMS was already on scene. And so just kind of a weird way for my first call to go. But we get on scene and we see the ambulance backing out of the driveway, and Tyler Stinson gets out gets on the radio and says, "Hey, I've got a doc, on board, like let him in." And so he's like, get out, go to the ambulance. And so I get out, walk towards the ambulance drives right past me.
Because you for either they didn't hear that we have a doc on scene, or they were looking for the crotchety old man in the Buick.
Right. Yeah, could have been. No, but talking with the EMT that was driving, and she's now a paramedic actually, but talking to her afterwards, she heard over the radio, "I've got an EMT on board."
Okay.
And so in her mind, she's like, I've got a dying kid in the back.
Yeah.
I'm not like stopping.
We're not worried about basics.
An EMT get in the back.
So they just took off.
So they just took off and left me. And Tyler Stinson in the QRV didn't see that I did not get in the ambulance. And so he left. And so I just got left on scene. And thankfully there was another EMS supervisor on scene with a QRV, and they're like, "Hey doc, you need a ride?"
Yeah, actually I do.
Yeah,
I got left.
Yeah.
So you get to the hospital. Obviously we transported, we get to the ER. You come walking into your ER.
Yeah, my ER.
And you're like, "Thanks for the ride, bro."
Yeah.
And where do we
and so this was a pediatric drowning, and I don't remember all the details of how old the kid was or anything like that.
I don't remember either. It was I want to say 4.
That's probably about right, but I don't really remember. But one of the other doctors was had just in the process of taking over patient care, getting report from EMS. She sees me and was like, "Oh, hey Tyler, come help." And so unfortunately that sounds like that kid was probably in the water for a while. I'm not sure there was much that could have been done.
There was, the way I understand it, there was nothing anybody could have done.
No.
I mean, everything was done that could be done. But
yeah.
But that was the call, because that morning I woke up and heard of the meeting, and I went to the meeting, and then those guys were sitting around having a CISD meeting, critical incident stress debriefing. And that was the call that the meeting we were talking about it. And then CIV kind of grew out of that. And so here we are. So another weird, just coincidence.
Yeah. Very, very, very strange. And Fennell was talking to me about this this podcast that you were doing, and saying I need to get hooked up with you and do this. And he started telling me about the story of stuff, and I was like, that was my first call, man. Like that was
that's great. And dogs running around, but no, I remember we were having coffee and you brought it up. I'm like, what? Holy crap. Like, how the fact that you were standing behind the dispatcher when the call came in and went en route with Stinson and ended up at the call and then walked into the ER. I assume you took over patient care and did your thing, or?
No, it was kind of a collaborative thing. I mean, with the doctor, I mean, she was the one that was mainly taking care of the kid.
Okay. So, but
I was helping out with stuff as well.
Okay.
Linen in hand. So, but that was, it's always tough, when a kid dies, but that I remember the family having not fully understanding that there was a language barrier, and that was a difficult call for, obviously, fire and EMS, but, I think also the, nurses in the ER, us as the physicians, that's a tough one.
That's on you, right? You have to be the one to, do you take them into a room and say, I'm very sorry? Like, are you the one that has to answer their questions to the family?
Yeah. So we generally bring, like the charge nurse in with us so that, it's not just us as the physician, but there's a nurse as well. And generally try to sit them down and start off with, every situation is a little bit different, but, first of all, what do you know, because sometimes the families come in and they kind of already know. Sometimes, he was just a little sick. He had a cough, and, they have no idea that this patient is now deceased.
A lot of times they hold out hope and they don't really I mean, we've been doing CPR before on people and they're like, they're going to make it, right? I'm like, it's not looking.
Yeah. I don't think the general public for the most part has a lot of understanding of CPR and
No.
So
is there a class when you're going through medical school? Like how do you learn that? Or is that just in you? I know your father was a doctor. We'll get into that in a minute. Mm-hmm. So you have a long history of this. Mm-hmm. Plus, so how do you learn that?
You kind of pick up on it with your mentors, like in medical school and residency, because you get brought into those conversations. You kind of get an idea. And obviously, just like with anything else, some physicians are better at this than others. Sure. But there is some overarching kind of education and instruction on how best to do that process, and it's never easy. I mean, I've done this.
I can't imagine it would ever be easy
at this point, but it's never easy. But there is some education through medical school and residency on how to deliver bad news. Yeah.
But a lot of it is just learning as you go.
A lot of it is, unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's never going to get easy, obviously, but, and it's never going to stop.
No.
So, because what do you expect? 30, 40 year career? That's a lot of,
we can get in this later as well, but just like in fire and EMS, there's a lot of burnout in the emergency department for nurses and physicians as well. And, I saw my dad go through a lot of burnout. He was an ER physician. And I think because of that, I have kind of come up with some tools to help me, I guess, prevent getting burned out.
Okay. What are those?
One of them is early on in residency, I think probably early on in my first year of residency, I kind of came up with this rule of, for me to have a good shift, I need to either have a patient that was genuinely appreciative, and that doesn't have to be like over the top, but just a genuine thank you, like, hey, we appreciate what you did for our family member, or hey doc, thanks for taking care of me, just something like a heartfelt thank you. Mm-hmm. Either that or a patient that I learned something from. It could be something like, hey, I've read about this in med school, but I've never actually seen this in real life. And, or, I never really would have thought about that. That was a close miss. Maybe, a nurse came to me with, hey, did you notice this or something? And be like, oh man, no, like I missed that, and able to learn from it, And so it doesn't have to be both things. It's just one or the other, either an appreciative patient or, a patient that I learned something from. Okay. And that way I can, just say, hey, this was a good shift. I had a positive.
Because obviously, experience comes from doing.
Yeah.
So,
mm-hmm. And I think some of at least in the emergency department, some of burnout does reality meet expectations? And I think the expectations of the emergency department of being an emergency medicine physician can be really high. It's can be looked at as a sexy job, lots of trauma, and
I think it's just a bunch of nurses sleeping with each other and partying, and but it's not Chicago ER or whatever that show is.
Right.
It's
so just having, a realistic set of expectations and setting those expectations low so that, I can come away with every shift and say, hey, that was a good shift.
I think that's what I've mentioned expectations before with the fire departments, because I think we don't do, I think we need to do a better job with these expectations, because we have 18-year-old kids coming in the door wanting to be firemen.
Yeah.
They think they're going to fight fire all day. And then when they find out that like
it's like lift assist calls in the
87% of our job is lift assist and medicals and,
right.
Shootings, hangings, stabbings, gory stuff. And they're like, well, what the hell?
Yeah.
And then they, because I don't think we prepare, those expectations.
Right.
Right. So the same thing is going on in the ER where you have to manage these expectations of these nurses. Like, here's the reality of it.
For sure.
So, and obviously some days you just have a boring shift, I'm sure, right? Can you have a slow day in the ER?
Yeah.
Is there such a thing?
Yeah. You never want to use that word or the Q word, quiet.
Oh, you never want to say quiet?
Yeah.
Well, it sure is quiet in here.
Yeah. Never say that in the ER. you will get death stares.
That's like talking to the goalie when you're shooting a shutout and you're in the third period, like, hey, keep up.
Yeah.
You never say shutout.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
But you've walked out of the ER, gotten home, and you're like, oh, that was kind of you can say the Q word when you get home, right?
Yeah.
That was a quiet night.
Yeah.
And which is good. We want quiet nights. We don't.
Yeah.
First responders we don't want to run calls. I'm speaking for myself, but I don't care if I ever go to another fire. That means nothing's burning.
Yeah.
If people would learn how to drive and behave, 90% of what we do would be, calm and,
Yeah.
But it's never going to change.
No, people will be people.
People will be people. So earlier we were talking about, before we hit record, we were talking about the different stressors, like the ER versus the field.
Yeah.
Let's dive into that a little bit. You were talking about how when you're in the ER, because I mentioned that I think you have the whole world on your back. Because not only do we call you when we're in the field going, holy shit, it's hitting the fan. Doc has to sign off on what we're about to do and take responsibility. To me, that sounds like a boatload of stress on top of what you're doing already.
Yeah, but in a sense, like that's what I signed up for. That's what I trained for. That's what I anticipated. That's part of the job. In the EMS like calls that I've been a part of pre-hospital, what I've noticed and what I come away with is that y'all have the much more difficult job from a stressor, mental health kind of standpoint, because when I get the patient to the ER, I'm in kind of a stripped down, sterilized environment. Okay. Like, I've got a patient in front of me that, we're talking about maybe like a bad trauma or a suicide attempt or, something like that. Something that can cause a lot of, long-term emotional stress to the provider, whether it's, EMS, nursing,
sure,
physician. But I'm getting this stripped down, experience of what's going on. Y'all in fire, EMS, police, whatever, anything pre-hospital, you're going into the patient's house. You're seeing the pictures on the wall. You're seeing the dog, sitting there. Got the baby crying down the hall. The mom, on the couch, saying, please save my husband. The football game's still on.
Yeah.
I don't get that in the ER.
But it's weird to me to hear you say that you think that's more stressful than having all the responsibilities of the fire department when they call and go, hey, doc, we want to do this. Or, because once we call you, you're now in charge, right? It's all liability wise, it's on your shoulders.
Yeah. I mean, in a sense that, as the medical director, I'm kind of responsible for all of that anyway, whether y'all call me or not, in a sense. But yeah, you're right. I mean, if y'all are calling me for direction, you're involving me, and obviously that's bringing me into the responsibility, and it is on my shoulders to a degree, for sure. But I don't know, the medicine side of things never seems to be the difficult part. It's the interpersonal stuff. It's the dealing with the families and just
which you do though. But you're right though. They're not in the living room.
Mm-hmm. That just makes it all so much more personal. And there's a saying called "It's not my emergency," basically, and some of the older doctors that I've interacted with can probably have that mentality more. And that's probably a coping mechanism, honestly.
It's not my emergency.
It's not my emergency. I'm not going to get worked up about this,
Is that how they move on? Like,
yeah,
you pull the gloves off, walk out of the room,
Yeah.
and on to the next thing.
Right.
And they're not dwelling on.
Mm-hmm. But I think that's harder when you're in somebody's home and, on a, car accident,
Being in people's homes is a very personal thing.
Oh, for sure.
And I've never really thought too much on it until we were talking.
Yeah.
You're right, though, because when you look up, I use the example of grandma dies and she's 97, and we're just there and the family's crying. But then you see the wall of like a lifetime of photos, and you see grandma when she was 18, and you see these, these marriage photos of 50 or, all these photos. You're right. It's a very weird thing to do, is go into people's homes. And I don't know.
Yeah. I think, I mean, even though I didn't even like the patient, that kid, the drowning. Okay. That affected me. I've had lots of pediatric drownings. Okay. I wasn't even like really necessarily on the scene. I didn't see the pool. I wasn't in the backyard, but just being on scene and the chaos and everything was a lot more of a stressor than any of the other drownings I've been a part of in the ER.
Because you were in the emergency room, you're in trauma room 1 or whatever.
Yeah.
It's all sterile.
Yeah.
You have your staff, you have
and some of it might be, that's not as routine to me as working in the ER. And maybe if you're in EMS, and that's your job, that's what you've been doing for 20 years, that becomes more routine. I mean, and that's probably part of it as well. But, I've had other, I've seen lots of terrible burns of patients that ended up dying because of their burns. But, I've got this one, patient in my mind of, it was like literally the next call. I think it was literally, we went from that drowning to a structure fire indicator that the structure ended up being a person. They got paged out as a structure fire, but then they went in and there was nothing burning but the couch and the patient that was, on the couch. And, going on scene and seeing that patient, on scene is a lot more impactful than having that patient brought into the emergency department in that more sterilized
It's weird to hear a doctor's view of things because,
or the car wrecks I've been a part of, like just seeing the vehicle and everybody, standing around watching. And, I see how that can be a lot bigger stressor than me getting the patient in the emergency department. Not that it's not stressful or doesn't impact you. I mean, you're a human being, but it's different. And I would argue that y'all have the tougher end of that.
Like you're drumming up some memories. We ran a multi-patient ejection. I don't know if that's the right word, rollover. They all got thrown out of the car. One of them was dead in the highway, and he was laying on the transition between the highway and the interstate bridge. So now when I go over that and I hear that, when you become on the bridge, that triggers that memory. So it's weird. I've never thought about like the environment that we go in and we work in has a lot, like you're saying, is more stressful and adds a lot more tension to what we're doing. On top of what we're doing is just, like
for sure.
Getting in the pool on your first call, those guys got in the pool and were waiting around.
Yeah.
And from what I understand, there was a lot of debris in the pool and it was maybe knee deep.
Yeah, it was like murky water.
One of those pools that had been, empty for a long time and the kid had fallen in there. So they were, waiting around trying to feel for a child.
Yeah.
And so the stress of,
I mean, just think of all the sensory inputs you have in that situation,
mom's crying.
Yeah.
Family's over here losing it.
You smell the like nasty smelling pool, that's
your adrenaline's going through the roof.
And you're trying to feel a child with your foot.
There's probably a child in there and you're going to find it. And then what do? And then pulling a child out of a pool in front of the family, in front of bystanders.
Right.
It's interesting to think about, like, all the added, but I also couldn't do what you do because it just, you know, we talked about it, like we joked earlier, and it's a joke obviously, but it's like I go on scene and we might deal with you for 20 minutes where Doc has to deal with you for 4 days or, you know, whatever. I don't want to deal with you longer than 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Because then you just kind of pass it off, and then you're like, hey, you guys want to go get Chick-fil-A? Or, you know, we try to go back to our normal lives.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the pro and con. You know, there's different types of stressors, I guess, and different elements of that. But sure, I think that's, you know, you're right. You do not have to deal with it as long, but on the other side of that, you don't get the feedback of what happened, or
we very rarely know
did you know, your stress and your you know, blood, sweat, and tears in that situation. I mean, you know, it's no secret that, you know, being a firefighter, EMS, whatever, I mean, it's a dangerous job, you know, and we can get into this in a second, but, you know, the statistics about, like, I think it was like, we were talking about, I think I saw
we'll pull those up
4%,
yeah.
You know, people have been, like, stabbed or shot at, you know, in EMS, like, that's crazy. And you want to know, like, okay, was it worth it? Did I make an impact, you know? And I think, you know, in EMS, you probably don't get that feedback a whole lot. I mean, I know here, like in the emergency department, that was one of actually my dad's biggest complaints about being an emergency medicine physician was, you know, you don't always get to know what happens to those patients, because you admit them, you transfer them, whatever.
Well, and how healthy is it to really get too involved in every one of those patients too? But
it's helpful, I think, to know what the end outcome was.
I know I would like to know if I made an impact, a positive impact.
Right.
Because it does help a little bit to know. Like I've been to 3 or 4 child drownings, and I did not realize that any of them had made it. Through all this conversations and stuff, I was brought to my attention that one had lived, and I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, well, that would have been nice to know, or, you know, I don't know.
Yeah.
You get to see people. Well, maybe not in the ER as much, but
yeah, that's the issues in the emergency department. Oftentimes I don't know, because if I admit them to my hospital, you know, I can look and see what happens, and, you know, that's easy. But oftentimes we're, you know, transferring for different reasons because we don't have this specialty or whatever. And when they leave your hospital, I mean, you don't have access.
Well,
you don't know.
The door's still open and there's people coming in.
Yeah.
You got a job to do.
Yeah.
So
and that's the other thing, is like, you're so busy. It's like, I mean, I might think like, oh yeah, I want to follow up and see what happened to this patient. But the reality is, like, how often does that actually happen? You're busy, and, you know, it's, you know, you're 10 patients past that, you know, in a couple hours, and kind of forgot all about it.
I think it's cool. Like, if we can get more conversations between, you know, nurses in the ER and first responders, and have conversations where, like, we find out that we're a lot alike.
I think,
but then we're more alike than we think.
Yeah.
But then we also have a different opinion and approach on what, because you're seeing it from over there, and I can give you, it's interesting to hear different perspectives of kind of the same thing. We're all in the same boat.
And I think the whole idea of conversation is ventilation is incredibly useful and important. And I think, you know, I don't think we do as a good enough job in medicine and in the emergency department as we should for, you know, debriefing and talking about, you know, difficult patients, difficult encounters and stuff like that. Oftentimes just because we're time limited. It's the next patient. You know, you just don't have time to sit down and do it. But I think that, you know, the hospital oftentimes will organize, you know, things for particularly bad, you know, things that happen. But I don't know. I get the sense that, you know, in EMS, it's probably not even as much of a culture of that.
I think we should be microdosing CIV.
Yeah.
I think
just a continuous.
I think it should be just a constant conversation to where, because nobody likes it when the boss makes everybody get in a room and sit down. Let's talk about that bad call.
Everybody's like, can't be top up. It's got to be
like, hurry up, let's go. I'm hungry, or, you know, I got shit to do, and people are not in the mood. But but if we're always just kind of having this open dialogue about things, and then like, you go, I don't know how if you hang out with anybody you work with, but you just go have a beer and throw some axes and talk about things and vent a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I've found, and a lot of us have found, just that alone helps tremendously.
Oh,
because it kind of just takes it and just makes it more okay. And, and you're like, okay, we were all on that call. We can talk about it, or you guys can talk about,
Yeah. I think, especially in my emergency department, we've got a pretty good culture. It's a bunch of young emergency medicine trained physicians that are all recently out of residency. We're all friends. We all hang out outside of work. Multiple of us all own like a duck hunting property together. So like we're always out there like hanging out, shooting guns, hunting, stuff like that. And
inventing.
I mean, obviously work comes up a lot.
Yeah. Because you share that in common, you're going to vent about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's good, I think.
For sure.
But these young kids are never going to really know how it was when I came in 2004, because we're changing that, and where it's changed. Just these younger kids are different. They're not usually, I don't know. They seem a little more open to me. They seem a little more willing to talk. The older guys are a little harder, but I don't know. It's nice to see. I feel like we're moving in a positive direction. And
I think that's true. I think, younger generations probably are a little bit more willing to open up and talk and express their thoughts and feelings and everything. But, on the other hand, I feel like there's less life experience, and the expectations growing up have been maybe different. And so not as well prepared for on other aspects.
Well, and that's where people like me, I need to, the older guys need to be showing the younger guys, hey, this is okay to talk about. Oftentimes the older guys are usually the ones that will start a conversation at the station, or, sitting at the dinner table, or, and, it doesn't have to be these mega conversations, but it's microdosing. Sure. It's just simply being, hey, we're in this together. Sometimes things get crazy. It's not normal what we do.
And I think it's easy to overlook the mental health side of things, or say, oh, that's not me, or it can't be me. And, I'm strong. I'm not going to talk about it. I'm just going to put up a front and whatever. But, it's real. It's out there. I just recently got back from a conference out in San Diego.
Yep, let's lead into that. You got some great stats.
So it was the NAEMSP, National Association of EMS Physicians, and their medical director course. And it's a great course. It's always filled every year, so it's taken me a few years to actually be able to get into it. So I was glad I was able to get into it.
Well, you also had to wait till you're old enough to rent a car. Well, you can Uber, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm just kidding. He's awfully young. He should be driving a Buick.
Yeah. But one of the talks they gave was on, mental health in EMS.
And this was after we met for coffee.
This was after we met.
Yep.
So this was perfect timing. And I was like, man, this is great to talk about. And so, I'm not going to get into the whole thing, but, talked a lot about, EMS in general, fire and, just EMS, and the workforce, and how, lots of people are leaving, not as many people are joining, and how that's creating issues, and what's the reason behind it. And kind of pre-COVID, it was the biggest characteristics associated with leaving EMS. Number one was actually pay. And so I know you've talked about how, like, obviously lots of firefighters are working multiple jobs.
Most firemen moonlight.
Yeah.
It's just,
and the pay for EMS is not great,
Nope.
So that obviously creates stressors. Another one is people are leaving to further their education, switch careers, advance their career, whether that's, doing the bridge program from paramedic to nursing, to become a nurse, to get a little bit higher pay, and, not having to,
ride around on the ambulance all night, and 12-hour shifts.
Right.
And,
obviously, like, nursing is a very difficult job as well, but different stressors. But, those were kind of the big things.
Okay.
Then COVID happened, and the changes since COVID, there's two new things that are causing people to go out of EMS and leave. The first, number one, is just stress in general, which is exactly kind of what we're talking about here. And number two was just COVID itself. So all of those other reasons, the pay and advancing their career and everything, were much lower post-COVID than pre-COVID. So we've had quite a shift since COVID, and I think that's important to recognize.
Did they give a reason why all of a sudden the stressors of this, or are we becoming more aware of it, or did COVID?
I think COVID
scared the hell out of everybody. It was
just a huge stressor on the system in general. You know, you had people getting overworked. You had just, you know, obviously dealing with a lot more death than people were used to. Not having the resources available to deal with those patients and take care of them like, you know, we would like to be able to. I mean, I know in the emergency department, I mean, we were filled up with, you know, with intubated, you know, COVID patients, you know, that were just taking up all of our rooms. And then we were doing, you know, waiting room medicine, which unfortunately we still are. I mean, that's the reality of, you know, the post-COVID world. And, you know, it was like that before COVID, but it's certainly worse now. And that creates a lot of stressors. But I think one of the most important things that statistics that I wanted to bring up was the fact that 64% of EMS professionals experience occupational violence. And you know,
we were talking about that earlier.
Yeah, I mean, some of this is no surprise. I mean, cursing 97%, punching 43% of EMS professionals gotten punched, spit on 39%, bit 12%, struck with an object 12%, but stabbed or shot, that's 3.6%. I mean, that's still a pretty high percentage of people.
And this isn't just shot. This isn't just, you know, firefighters or EMS out on the field. This is nurses. This is all first responders, all EMS.
This is EMS. This is just pre-hospital.
Okay.
This is pre-hospital. Yeah.
No,
but I mean, it's the same in the ER with nursing. I mean, my girlfriend, she's an ER nurse, not in Decatur, but you know, she's been assaulted and had to press charges. I mean, she's just been, texting me on my way to work on the way here saying, you know, she was getting like verbally kind of assaulted in the ER today, you know?
Well, unfortunately, you know, sometimes there's drugs and alcohol involved.
For sure.
So these people aren't in their right mind to begin with, you know, and then they're altered mental status. And then sometimes they're just rude. And then they see a girl in scrubs and they're going to be mean.
But it takes a toll. I mean, if you think about that for your whole career, I mean, that takes a toll, and that's gonna cause stress and you know, cause people to burn out for sure. But I think the suicide thing is the more important one. And so the suicide risk. So this is specifically for firefighters. So this is pretty applicable. So firefighters who have witnessed one or more deaths by suicide having an increased odds ratio of suicidal ideation or suicide attempts by 2. So that means you double your risk of suicidal ideation and death by suicide just by witnessing one suicide attempt.
So from the stress of seeing it and then maybe realizing that's an option.
Yeah. Just by seeing one doubles your risk. Which is important to recognize. I mean, you know, this is not something to just, you know, brush off of, this sucks, man. And no. You know,
it's always weird to talk about suicides because a lot of people don't think, first off, you don't hear about it in the paper. So your neighbor would never know that the house next door that happened. Yeah. Number 2, nobody wants to talk about it. Number 3, it's a weird thing because it's just not that conversation. You're not going to be sitting at the duck house with you shooting birds going, "Hey Tyler, we want to talk about suicide."
Right.
And you'd be like, no. You know, like, it's such a, I don't know. I'm at a loss for words when it comes to suicide. Cause first it never dawned on me that I would be going to these things. I've talked about that before. Like, fresh out of school, I went to a hanging. I'm like, where was that in the book? Yeah. You know, I mean, EMT basic. I am the basic ABCs, sample history, you know, apply pressure, basic EMT. And then it's like, you get on scene, you know, you've been in your career for 2 months and you're a firefighter. And then there's a guy hanging there. You're like, I don't remember seeing that in the book.
Yeah.
And then you're like, well, who do I talk to about that?
Mm-hmm.
And then nobody wants to talk about it. And now here we are.
Yeah.
You know,
for sure. But this gets me back to why I feel like those in fire and EMS need to understand how difficult that is of a job when, like, yes, I see that same patient. Well, that patient, no, if they're actually deceased, but you know, a suicide attempt unsuccessful. Yeah. That comes to the ER and I see that patient, but that's a very different thing for me to see in the emergency department than to see in the patient's home, you know,
or
with,
in a drug house. Or,
yeah. And so I think it's important for you to recognize that and give yourself a little bit of a grace about that and realize like, hey man, that's tough to deal with. That's not something people see every day.
Yeah.
And you need to talk about it and not just hold that in.
Exactly. Microdosing CIV.
Yeah,
exactly. That's, you know, and that's one of the number one things with these young kids is like, you know, we're now paying more attention to these young kids. And we're like, hey, you get back from that wreck, like last shift, we were talking about that wreck I ran with the multiple ejections.
Yeah.
It's like, you got to look around and go, whose first was that? You know? And then you go, well, we need to start a little bit of a conversation. It doesn't need to be a full on get in the classroom conversation, but we need to start that process.
And then, having that culture.
And that culture of like, and, you know, and then microdosing that call for the rest of our career and just talking about it. So then, you know, in 20 years when he's a lieutenant, he's going to do that with, you know, we're going to fix the problem. Right. And his crews in the future will have a different approach, you know?
Yeah.
And that can happen with your you know, all the nurses and doctors in the ER. You guys have to be, you know, you're on the same team.
For sure. Yeah. And this is an issue in the hospital as well. And unfortunately, I feel like sometimes the different specialties in medicine and all don't play together super nice.
You got a bunch of egos.
Yeah.
I'm a cardiologist. I don't talk to you.
You know, but I wish we would kind of be a little bit more supportive of each other in medicine.
But that starts with us
in the hospital. Absolutely.
Starts right here with the conversation.
But it's the same thing for, you know, nurses in fire, nurses in EMS, physicians in EMS. Like, you know, we're all kind of on the same team. We all have the same patient. We all have shared experiences. Yeah. And I think it's important for all of us to kind of talk about all of this and give each other a little bit of a break. And
the stigma is probably ever going to come down completely.
Yeah, for sure.
But you can scrape off a layer or two on the top and go, look, okay, we're all on the same team.
Yeah.
Like even with PD, which we get PD shit all the time, you know, those guys have that's a hard job.
That's a tough job. Especially in today's day and age.
Oh
I mean,
so they get a lot of slack with me, but I would love to just sit around and like, okay, guys, let's just relax.
Yeah.
You know, because we are all on the same team. And you know, I have great respect for you and what you do and nurses. And I mean, these men and women are working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, kicking ass and taking names.
Yeah.
You know, and same with fire, same with PD, same with dispatch, same with, you know, corrections. We just have a tendency not to want to talk to each other.
Yeah.
And it's not that hard. It doesn't have to be mind blowing.
No. And, you know, just doesn't even have to be about the patient care to start off with. Just making friendship, you know, across those lines and having somebody to be able to talk to. So.
Yeah. Because, you know, I'm sure you see a lot of new nurses that are fresh out of school and their eyes are, you know, huge. And
and unfortunately with the nursing turnover, you know, we don't have a lot of older experienced, you know, nurses in the yard because they cycle through because it's a tough job and it's, you know, not what it's, you know.
So what do we got to do to get nurses to stay?
I mean, it's multifactorial. I mean, I think it's pay, it's workload, it's admin, you know, being more involved and that's this is a universal thing. I'm not talking about my hospital in particular, but it's just those are things that I hear from nurses and physicians and stuff everywhere that, you know, and it's hospitals are in a tough spot financially and you know, dealing with, you know, an aging population and insurance all, it's a very complex world, and everybody's just kind of doing the best they can as far as the frontline workers.
But you're confident.
Yeah.
Because you're going to be around for a while.
Yeah.
So
yeah. That's the thing. Like, I enjoy my job. Even if I wasn't getting paid, I'd still probably work a shift here or there. I mean,
Really?
oh yeah. I spent so much time getting to this point. I'm not going to just like throw it all away, at least initially, like I enjoy most days. I enjoy going to work. I enjoy my coworkers. I enjoy, the patient population that I get to take care of. It's a very appreciative population, a lot of blue collar people that, I frequently, just about every shift, I have an interesting patient and a thankful patient. So that's great. I love the nurses and the docs I work with. So, but getting back to that, I mean, it's just sometimes it's about setting expectations and focusing on the positives.
Yeah. I was just thinking too, how we've made comments at the fire station where when they call 911 and we get there, the red truck gets there, they expect all the answers on that truck.
Yeah.
Because they always look at firemen like, what do we do? Fix this. Yeah. And I was just thinking, you know what, you're that guy, in my opinion, on a bigger scale. Because you have to know what to do. It's your job.
Yeah.
You have a team of people.
Yeah.
Which we have a team
that I rely on, and specialists that I can call, and it's always a team effort.
So you ever just throw an audible and like call somebody in like, hey?
Oh yeah. I mean, just last night, I had a patient that, I was like, this is a little strange, talk to the other doc, like, hey man, what do you think about this? Kind of ran the patient by him. He's like, yeah, I mean, sounds like you're doing all the right things. You're on the right track, So, I mean, we don't always have all the answers at every single point in time, but
no, we all assume you do. You're supposed to have all the answers.
You got to know where your resources are and how to use them.
No, and I hate to tell you if you're listening that we don't have all the answers either. Firemen get off the truck and we're winging it, know, and we're very good at, coming up with a game plan. Yeah. If it's not working, we pivot, and, it happens 4, 5, 6 times during a wreck. You're trying something new, and we're going to make
That's an important skill to.
You're thinking on your feet and you're just, going with the flow, so it's very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
So your dad let's get back to this real quick. Your father, is he the reason you're here today?
Yeah, I think so.
So we got to give dad some props.
Yeah. So, my dad was a paramedic, while he was in med school. And then my mom was a paramedic before she went into nursing school. They actually met, on a call. So my dad was, the paramedic. My mom was in paramedic school. They were on scene of, I guess, like a wreck or something like that. And my mom got out of the back of the ambulance,
and he's like,
she like walked around the back of the ambulance right as a car was coming, and he had to like pull her out of the way from like getting hit by a car or something like that.
You're telling me a movie script.
No, that's I mean, that's what I've been told my whole life, at least.
And now you're here.
Yeah, now I'm here. Yeah. And so then my mom went on to, she was a flight nurse for med flight for a little while.
So you come from a heavy medical background.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you couldn't come home one day in high school and go, I think I want to be an artist. They would have been like, no.
Well, so
you're going into medicine.
The funny thing, actually, like my dad told me not to go to medicine.
Really?
Yeah, he was like, don't go to med school. Like, be an engineer, do something else. And so like when I went to Alabama for undergrad, I actually started off in engineering school, till I decided I hated that, and I was like, well, actually, Dad, I think I am going to go to med school. And he's like, that's fine. Just don't be an ER doctor. Go be a radiologist or something like that.
And what are you doing?
And so now I'm here.
No, you're in the ER.
In the ER. So
there's another great story.
Yeah.
So I mean, someday when your kid is wanting to be in medical, you're like, you remember Grandma and Grandpa met on a wreck, and you're all blah blah blah.
Right. So, but I grew up, with them always telling, great stories of different, pre-hospital things. My mom talking about, all the med flight days, and back working in South Florida during spring break, and, just all the stuff back in the 80s.
Oh. So you come from a long background of caretakers and people that are givers. Sure. And, my brother's the same way. My brother's at Laurie Hospital in Chicago. My sister is a social worker.
Yeah.
I'm a firefighter. We all kind of fell into that same thing. And I remember once we were at my brother's graduation, and one of the nurses, I think she was a sister too. She pulled my mom aside and said, you did a really good job with these kids, because they're all giving, they're all helping.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh shit, you're right.
Yeah.
We're all, plus I wasn't smart enough to be an engineer, because if you can go make the money that the engineers are making, oh my God. But great. Good stuff.
Yeah.
So, well, I think we hit a lot.
Yeah. Covered a lot of stuff there.
Anything off?
Not that I can think of. Hit all the kind of topics I was thinking about.
Okay. Yeah. Microdosing, CIV, just having these conversations, looking out for each other. When you're in the ER, these young nurses, you're getting turnover way faster than the fire department is. So you're seeing fresh faces all the time.
Yeah.
It's even more important for you to probably be that doctor that just really goes, hey, you might take an extra minute or two and go, it's okay.
Yeah.
Take a minute, gather yourself up. We'll be fine. We can talk about it later if you want, or just changing that mentality of you don't have to ball it up and take it home. We're doing that with the fire department as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where I would encourage anybody. I mean, if you're listening to this and, you need somebody to talk to, reach out to somebody. I mean, hell, it could be me. I mean, you can reach out to me to talk, whatever.
Teammates are always, in my opinion, the teammates are the first go-to.
Yeah.
Because they were there. They understand you.
Yeah.
I could call you and we could have a conversation and at least we can relate to each other. The guys and the girls on the truck, on the engine, were there on that call, so my first stop is always like, talk to the team.
Yeah.
But it's an amazing thing when you just kind of slowly break that down a little bit, and it doesn't have to be crazy, but when you and your bros are hanging out, shooting ducks and, drinking Busch Light, you can have some, you can talk about feelings.
Absolutely.
You don't have to talk about your feelings, but you can indirectly just kind of ventilate a little bit, let some of the smoke out.
Exactly.
It's a great thing.
Yeah.
All right, Dr. Goldbach. I'm so happy that we bumped into each other at Publix last shift, and because we were trying to schedule this back and forth. He's busy, and I'm busy, and a little lazy at times. And we bumped into at Publix, and we made it happen. So great, good
Glad
story.
we were able to, Well,
thanks for coming, and stay safe, stay together.
You as well.
Okay, appreciate you.
Of course.
Thank you.